So Bkchat season 3 is here and it's arrived, and I feel like this topic was a great opening. There's a collective union amongst all the cast members and progression was being made. However, there were slight rifts between people like Riva and Lucas and Nissy and Lucas, but we will get into that bit by bit.
Every civilization you see today is built on wars, B.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Lucas. But you're in a country that you're struggling. What's the benefit? What's the benefit? What are you talking about?
Privileged to be in that position.
No, it's not about privilege.
It is. You're a privileged black person to do that. Like, there's some people that don't know no different. They're in the slums every day. Allow it, man. You using words, and it's different for me. The institution that you're saying, I'm trapped in. Wait, sorry,
But Lucas, you know what will burn though? That you will get arrested, and that you will end up in the system and end up like the many black boys that we have in our system through the same thing, and that is painful.
And there's plenty of black boys that don't believe the system the way you believe the system. Yeah. And then I smack you in your face. I'm not getting back.
Hey guys, it's Marad Raleigh. Hope you guys are all doing well today. Now, I know I've won the top for like 10 million times, but best believe the last 2 weeks has been a roller coaster for me. I don't even care about what I'm wearing, so let's just get straight into this. We have this particular topic of racism that has brought itself upon. I said in my teaser review that I want to see, interesting reviews of interesting topics, and I feel like this was, somewhat of that in a different scenario of if you were called the N-word or racist term, primarily the N-word, what would you do? Would you obviously physically hit them, or would you ignore it if I was your neighbour? Now, normally what I do with my reviews of this show is I add my own review to it, my own 20 cents, but because I am not a black person, I have therefore not lived through that or been called that at all, so I really can't add my 20 cents to that conversation, so I'm just going to review what everybody else is saying. I feel like Riva, when I smelled out Riva, I was like, Riva's back.
Self-control is power, if you get what I mean. When you spark your neighbour, you lost self-control. When you lost self-control, you were, consequences were placed in front of you. And
I was just so happy to see her. She's slaying with the blonde hair. She's looking real good. And she was talking about how self-control is power. And it really and truly is. I feel like that in itself is something that is very important, and you're able to control yourself and able to, garner and harness the power that was given. But at the same time, can you really desensitize and detach the power from that word? So I feel like that in itself is just a particular unique perception that everybody has. Some people may feel like they have detached it, and some people may not have. So it's all to do with your living experiences, which Lucas touched on, which was a very good idea as well. How he was thinking from his perspective that he's been through a lot of physical altercations, a lot of angry emotions in his life, therefore he's able to react to it differently as opposed to people like Nissy. And I feel like there's a big disagreement here between when Nissy was saying, it's better not to have physical altercations, have that power because of the institutional systems and so forth, and how they're all against it, etc, etc, etc. And I do totally understand where they're coming from. But then Lucas obviously brings in his entire perspective, which is a very good food for thought. How can one act like that if they've been through different things in life that will lead into that particular reaction? Money's speech at the end literally had just caught my life, because he really was going through.
You're not worth the criminal record. You're not worth the time in prison. The word is nigger. That's 1 second. You said the word. Are you happy? Go about your business. Guess what? You go to prison. If you spend 30 minutes in a cell, you can't get 30 minutes back, bro.
At the same time, this whole idea of talking about, black guys and how they're well endowed and so forth as a joke, that in itself I really do not agree with. So when it comes to this entire debate, there are so many different perspectives, and what it is with this particular episode, which was very different from the rest, is that of the same cast members I agreed with and the same cast members I also disagree with. So it's very difficult in terms of reviewing the actual premise of what these people have said. It's not just white people. It's not just white people that use these particular words and think they are allowed to use it, whether it can be in music, whether it can be within the little circle of friends, whatever. It's not just white people who not only will use this word, but there's also a sense of anti-blackness in these particular cultures, even in these particular religions, deep, just in the premise of these particular cultures and religions, people do have this anti-blackness in these, and I feel like this in itself really wasn't asserted in any shape, form or manner. So I feel like that in itself is an important point that I would have made if I was there, that it's not just white people that be using these words, that be talking like this, that be having these mindsets, that be having this anti-blackness. It can be plenty of different cultures, whether it's East Asians, whether it's South Asians, whether it's Arabs, whether it's American Latinas, where it's North Africans, that literally just goes on and on and on. So really and truly, It isn't just white people. So that in itself, I feel like a point that I made. And we've got Malika now. What annoyed me about this particular episode is that she didn't speak enough, I feel, number one. Number two, the camera wasn't really showing her for the entire episode. And at times, I forgot she was there. I thought it was just the four other girls, but that's only because the camera was not showing her face. But that in itself just irritated me. But I feel like she did make a good point when it comes to parental impact.
People, and that's only half of me, because my mum raised me like that, and I've got them morals, but other people don't care. You know, some people, all they care about is boobs. They don't care.
Our childhood is a particular area of our life where things can occur, and when they occur at a certain level of emotion or impact or severity, it can be very, very impactful for the rest of your life. So I feel like that in itself is an important make that she made, where parental impact can be huge. Your parents should be teaching what in terms of education, in terms of how to be taught, in terms of what's this and what's that, and to be aware of certain things, to be aware of the education system, how people can be taught some things and missed out the others. So that in itself is a good gate for the child in order to walk into, so that he understands a small premise of what actually is going on before he puts his foot in the door because of his parents. So I feel like Malika's point was very interesting. We have Bimani's idea of, making a joke of it in response. Now that in itself, I feel like I agree with Adrian in this point, because really and truly by making a joke of it, you're only adding up to another stereotype, another form of sexual racism, because it is a positive form of fetishization where you feel like you're able to joke about something, but really and truly that person is obviously, that may be your response, and you may joke about it, may walk on, and of course the impact will be less, but at the same time you're still being a bit jovial and you're still joking about the actual matter, and you're joking about racism. You're only giving them more ammunition, giving them more fuel to talk about stuff. And I feel like that response and joking about it isn't the way that I would go through, isn't the way that I feel like someone would or should go through something like that. But at the same time, it's very hard for me to comment on this particular topic, because at the same time I'm not a black person, therefore I cannot say what someone should do or what they should not do, because I have not lived through those processes. It's like, for example, I'll give you another example. Like I can't talk about labour pains that a lady has gone through when they're about to give birth, because something that I have not lived through, so I can't speak on it, and I shouldn't speak on it, and it's just simple as that. I close the book and call it a day. It's difficult because at times you subconsciously want to assert what you should do, but at the same time you really can't because you haven't been through it. So that in itself is a bit interesting in terms of me reviewing this particular topic. And then we have Riva talking about how she was continuing on, and I feel like I agree with people like Riva and Nissy, and I feel like when these two are tag teaming, it was just this education thing was just seeping through, and I just feel like these two make a powerful duo together that I did not see coming, and I feel like they were great on the show. They're very informative, and they really think about and what they say before they speak, and that's how we know them as two characters. And I feel like but the point that I was a bit confused by was when Lucas said to Nissy that she was a privileged black person because she has not gone through something that he may have gone through.
Privileged to be in that position.
No, it's not about privilege.
It is. You're a privileged black person to do that. Like, there's some people that don't know no different. They're in the slums every day. Allow it, man.
I don't think that will make you a privileged person just because you're able to think and stop about certain situations and not respond in a physical manner. It does not mean that you are a privileged person. It just means that you're able to think in a certain way, you've learned certain things, you've taken time to stop. But at the same time, it's also interesting because Lucas grew up in a different environment where aggression.
You using words, and it's different for me. The institution that you're saying, I'm trapped in. Wait, sorry.
But Lucas, you know what will burn though? That you will get arrested, and that you will end up in the system and end up like the many black boys that we have in our system through the same thing, and that is painful.
And there's plenty of black boys that don't believe the system the way you believe the system. Yeah. And then I smack you in your face. I'm not getting back.
I assume it's something that he was surrounded by, therefore that would be his most easier motive when it comes to reacting. So it's definitely interesting, and it's very, I don't know, it's one of those reviews that I was thinking about a lot at the end, rather than, it wasn't something that was just about sex and all this. So that in itself is interesting, but it gave light. I feel like it gave light to situations like institutional racism, judiciary systems that are against certain people, education system, corporate racism, that is still rife. It may not be in your face like in America and etc, but in the UK and especially in London, it can be very subtle, especially in the corporate world, especially the way people speak about certain things in terms of attractiveness, etc. So I feel like that in itself was touched on, and I feel like that in itself was very important to be touched on.
That is different to the way dealing with other people make you feel like a nigger. You won't do nothing. Why? Because that's your daily bread. There's certain circumstances that you will be in, that you will be dealt with like a nigger, yeah, and you will not retaliate.
I do feel like when Lucas was talking about his particular situation about that particular person. You called him that name, and then you banged him, and then, you know, then they had dialogue, and then they got on and so forth, and it was ignorant behaviour. I feel like that particular situation that you were just giving excuse for that person anyways, because that person, you know, you can't just say they're ignorant, they said it, you know, move on. As far as I'm concerned, that person isn't a 4-year-old kid. That person is a grown man. Whoever called you that person or grown person, they know what that word means. Whether they're ignorant or not, they have chosen to be ignorant. Therefore, what you are doing is by insinuating some form of dialogue afterwards is giving them an excuse. That's what you're excusing them to say it, and then you can talk to them. There are chances that he probably knew what you were saying, and he knew why he said it. And whether he was ignorant or not, he's a grown person, he's a grown adult. That doesn't excuse him. I feel like you are justifying him. That particular situation, I was a bit, you know, it was just a bit weird. Again, I was going with Nissy when she's talking about, you know, you don't want to give them that short-term gratification, you want to give them that long-term gratification. So that particular point was very interesting. I feel like Nissy, Riva and B-Money and Adrian, not more so Adrian, but Nissy, B-Money and Riva were kind of just somewhat linking together with their points of, you know, violence is not the answer, keep it cool, but at the same time, you really don't know what you're going to do when it comes to that particular situation. So that in itself is very interesting. But B-Money is, at times, when he was talking about certain jokes, I was thinking like, you know, bruh, like, are we not going to have a few, are you not going to like censor your language? Because it was just funny. But at the end of the day, I like B-Money's new character. I feel like he gels in well. I feel like Malaika, we could have had more of you, and the fact that the camera was cutting you out was a bit irritating, but you did add some good points. And B-Money's speech is very impactful. I feel like Adrian's point of, you know, the whole idea of, you know, you can't be jovial in response because you're only adding to the stereotype. That is a very valuable point. But at the same time, B-Money bounced off him by saying, you know, well, I'm not responding with physical altercations, I probably won't go to jail. Therefore, you know, it's more of an easier route, which I would agree with if you're comparing the two. Nissy and Riva, I feel like, were my highlights of the show. And I feel like B-Money's speech at the end was very good as well. Walia was there for decoration, unfortunately. And we have Ramla at the end, who was adding her certain points here and there about how she's been spoken to a particular area, what she would do in a particular place, and, you know, adding her own value. But overall, I feel like this episode was pretty good. It was a collective union of everybody coming together. There was no huge rifts between people. Talking about a very productive, interesting issue. And, you know, once again, as I said, it can be quite difficult to review because I obviously can't say what I would do in that situation because I can't live through it because I'm not black. But at the same time, I feel like what they were talking about, I would agree on certain issues from the same people and disagree with certain issues from the same people. So that in itself makes it a very interesting debate. And hats off to the Bkchat. This episode, I feel like, was a great episode. Everyone got along. It was a great opening. Let me know what you guys think on my review. Hit me up on my Instagram and my website. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll most definitely catch you guys soon.
Your father is here. Oh, Dana, kill it with me. Obana, Emi Nika, Emi Na, Emi Kata, Obana, oh, Dana, kill it with me. Obana, Emi Nika.